Have you ever felt overwhelmed at an airport, juggling bags, boarding passes, and maybe even a kid or two? Imagine this: a mother with 2 young children, her arms full of luggage, her face a mix of determination and exhaustion, weaving through the chaos of a busy terminal. The air hums with the sound of announcements, rolling suitcases, and the occasional cry of a toddler. She's clearly doing her best, but every step seems to be a battle. Now, here's the twist: this isn't just any ordinary passenger, but you wouldn't know that just by looking at her. She's dressed simply, her hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and she's focused on getting her kids to the gate without any major meltdowns. Passers-by offer quick glances, some sympathetic, others impatient, but no one stops to help. And as she finally approaches her gate, tired but relieved, the last thing she expects is to face outright disrespect. But that's exactly what happens next. What unfolds will leave you questioning how much we assume about people based on appearances, and the surprising lesson someone learns the hard way. Stay with us until the end, because trust me, you'll want to hear how this story ends. The final twist is worth it. As the mother approaches the gate, her youngest child tugs on her sleeve, whining about being tired, while the older one fumbles with a backpack that seems too big for his little shoulders. She juggles their needs with practiced patience, but the struggle is evident. Just a few more steps, she tells herself, willing her legs to keep moving. Meanwhile, the air hostess stands near the gate, clipboard in hand, her posture immaculate, and her uniform perfectly pressed. She scans the crowd with an air of efficiency, her eyes narrowing slightly as they land on the mother and her kids. A faint frown tugs at her lips. Here we go again, she thinks, another frazzled mom who can't manage her kids. As the mother steps up to the counter, she offers a polite smile and a quick apology for the delay. "I'm sorry, I just need a moment to sort our tickets," she says, her voice tinged with fatigue. The air hostess doesn't return the smile. Instead, she taps her pen against the clipboard, her impatience almost palpable. "Ma'am, please step aside if you're not ready. We have other passengers waiting," she says, her tone curt. The mother's cheeks flush, but she nods and steps to the side, fumbling through her bag for the tickets. Behind her, her kids start to squabble over a toy, and the sound seems to grate on the hostess's nerves. She mutters something under her breath, too low for anyone to hear clearly, but the irritation in her demeanor is loud enough. Passengers in line exchange awkward glances, sensing the tension. A few whisper among themselves, some clearly disapproving of the hostess's tone, but she doesn't seem to notice or care. For her, this is just another frustrating delay in a long day of dealing with passengers. What she doesn't realize is that this encounter is about to change her perspective in ways she never saw coming. With the tickets finally sorted, the mother gathers her kids and approaches the boarding gate once more. This time, she tries to project calm, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Her younger child clings to her leg, while the older one holds tightly to her hand. "Thank you for your patience," the mother says softly, as she hands over the tickets. The air hostess barely glances at her. She takes the tickets with a perfunctory nod and motions toward the jet bridge. "You can board now," she says, her voice devoid of warmth. It's not rude, exactly, but it's far from welcoming. As the family walks toward the plane, the mother feels the weight of the air hostess's disapproving gaze on her back. Her youngest trips slightly, and she crouches to steady him. "Careful, sweetheart," she whispers, her voice gentle. But the hostess lets out a small, audible sigh, just loud enough for the mother to hear. Inside the cabin, the tension only grows. The mother struggles to fit her carry-on into the overhead bin while keeping an eye on her kids. The older one is excitedly pointing out the window, and the younger is tugging at her coat. She tries to balance everything gracefully, but it's clear she could use a helping hand. Instead, the air hostess watches from a distance, her arms crossed. When the mother finally settles the kids into their seats, she leans over and says in a tone that borders on condescending, "Next time, you might want to plan ahead a little better. It'd make things easier for everyone." The mother freezes for a moment, caught off guard by the comment. She doesn't respond, she just offers a tight smile and turns back to her children. But the sting of the remark lingers. Around them, a few passengers exchange disapproving looks, sensing the tension but choosing to stay silent. What none of them realize, least of all the air hostess, is that this seemingly ordinary mother isn't just any passenger. And by the time this flight lands, the truth will leave everyone stunned. As the plane begins to taxi, The mother focuses on keeping her kids calm. Her older child bounces in his seat, excited by the novelty of flying, while the younger one clutches a stuffed animal, his wide eyes taking in the bustling cabin. It's a sweet, innocent moment, but it doesn't take long for small disruptions to follow. The older child, curious and full of questions, keeps pressing the flight attendant call button. "Mommy, what does this do?" he asks, his voice carrying through the cabin. The mother quickly explains, apologizing to the nearby passengers and gently redirecting his attention. She's visibly doing her best, but the air hostess is less forgiving. When she arrives at their route to address the repeated calls, her smile is tight, her tone clipped. "Ma'am, the call button is for emergencies or assistance. Please make sure your child understands that." The mother nods apologetically, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Of course. I'm so sorry." A few minutes later, the younger child accidentally spills his juice while reaching for his mother's hand. The liquid drips onto the tray table and begins to pool. The mother quickly grabs a handful of napkins and starts cleaning up, but the air hostess arrives just as the mess is being dealt with. "Ma'am, please try to control your children," she says, her tone sharp enough to cut through the hum of the cabin. The mother glances up, a mix of frustration and heart flickering across her face. "I'm handling it," she says quietly, trying to maintain her composure. The air hostess huffs and turns on her heel, muttering something under her breath that sounds suspiciously like, "Some people shouldn't travel." A few passengers nearby exchange glances, their expressions ranging from discomfort to silent outrage. Despite the hostess's clear irritation, the mother keeps her focus on her kids, soothing them with soft words and calming gestures. She's doing everything in her power to ensure they're comfortable and quiet. But for the air hostess, the family remains a source of disruption, a problem she wishes would simply disappear. Little does she know, this problem is about to become her biggest lesson yet. And by the time the truth comes to light, her regret will be impossible to ignore. As the flight progresses, the air hostess's patience continues to wear thin. She makes no effort to hide her disdain as she walks past the family's row, her gaze lingering on the mother with a look that speaks volumes. The other passengers begin to notice the tension, and whispers ripple through the cabin. When the mother politely asks for a second blanket, her younger child has fallen asleep, and she wants to keep him warm. The air hostess responds with a forced smile. "We only have a limited supply, man. Perhaps you should have brought one of your own," she says, her tone laced with sarcasm. The mother hesitates, taken aback by the unnecessary remark. "I understand," she replies softly, her voice barely audible. A passenger across the aisle speaks up, offering their own blanket to the mother. She accepts it gratefully, murmuring a quiet thank you, but the damage has been done. The final straw comes when the older child, trying to get comfortable, accidentally kicks the seat in front of him. The passenger turns around with a frown, but before the mother can apologize, the air hostess swoops in. "Ma'am, you need to control your children," she says loudly, her voice cutting through the cabin like a knife. Heads turn, and the mother flushes deeply, humiliated by the public scolding. "I'm sorry," she says, trying to explain, but the hostess weaves her off with a dismissive gesture. "Other passengers are here to enjoy their flight, not to deal with this," she snaps. The mother looks down, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusts her son's seatbelt. The older child looks up at her with wide, questioning eyes, clearly sensing the tension. The younger one stirs in his sleep, unaware of the commotion. Around them, passengers exchange disapproving glances, some shaking their heads at the hostess's behavior. A few mutter quietly among themselves, expressing sympathy for the mother, but no one steps in, leaving the air heavy with an unspoken sense of unease. What the air hostess doesn't realize is that her public display of judgment isn't just being noticed by the passengers. It's being noted by someone who holds far more power than she could imagine. And soon, her actions will come back to haunt her in a way she never anticipated. As the flight settles into its rhythm, the air hostess continues to cast judgmental glances at the mother and her kids. In her mind, she's already built a narrative. This woman clearly has no control over her children. Why do people like her even bother traveling? Each small inconvenience, be it a dropped toy or a restless shuffle, seems to confirm her assumptions. The mother, meanwhile, remains focused on her children, trying to anticipate their needs and keep them occupied. She's visibly exhausted but stays patient, her calm demeanor in stark contrast to the air hostess's growing irritation. At one point, the hostess, walking down the aisle with the beverage cart, pauses near the family's row. She leans in and, with a saccharine tone that barely masks her frustration, says, "Mom, if you'd planned a little better, this flight would be a lot smoother for everyone." The mother looks up, her expression a mixture of surprise and hurt. "I'm doing the best I can," she replies, her voice steady but quiet. The hostess simply raises an eyebrow, offering no acknowledgement of the effort it takes to travel alone with young children. Her internal monologue, however, is far less restrained. If she can't handle this, maybe she shouldn't have booked the trip in the first place. Some people just don't think things through. She's convinced she's in the right, that her sharp comments are justified. What the hostess fails to see is the bigger picture: the mother's quiet resilience, her unyielding focus on her children despite the obvious challenges. To her, the mother is just another difficult passenger in a long day of dealing with demanding travelers. But appearances can be deceiving, and as the hostess continues to pass judgment, oblivious to the growing unease among the other passengers, she remains completely unaware of the lesson that's heading her way, a lesson that will force her to confront her own biases in the most unexpected manner. By the end of this flight, our perspective on the mother, and on life itself, will shift dramatically. The plane finally takes off, and the cabin hums with the familiar sounds of air travel seatbelts clicking open, overhead bins shutting, and the occasional chatter of passengers settling in for the journey. The mother takes a deep breath, relieved that the most stressful part of boarding is over. She adjusts her younger child's blanket and hands the older one a coloring book to keep him occupied. For a brief moment, it seems like things are under control, but the air hostess, still watching from a distance, remains unimpressed. She notices every small movement, every fidget from the kids, as if searching for reasons to validate her growing disdain. When the meal service begins, the mother politely requests a special meal she pre-ordered for her younger child. The hostess sighs, checking her list, and returns with the tray, placing it on the mother's table with a curt "here." She doesn't offer any assistance as the mother tries to balance cutting the food into smaller pieces while keeping the older child entertained. Later, the older child accidentally spills a small packet of snacks onto the aisle. The mother quickly bends down to clean it up, but the hostess arrives before she's done. "Ma'am, please be more careful. This is a safety hazard," she says, her tone dripping with exasperation. The mother apologizes, her face reddening once again, but the hostess doesn't linger to hear it. As the hours tick by, the mother does her best to keep her children quiet and content. She hands them books, sings soft lullabies, and even hums a favorite tune to soothe the younger one back to sleep. The effort is obvious to those around her except to the air hostess, who sees only inconvenience. By now, a few passengers are openly frowning at the hostess's behavior. One older woman leans over to whisper to the mother, "You're doing great, dear. Don't let her bother you." The mother smiles faintly, her gratitude evident, but the tension lingers. What no one realizes yet is that the mother is not only aware of the air hostess's treatment, but is also taking careful mental notes. And when the time comes to reveal her true identity, the ripple effect will be felt throughout the entire cabin. The air hostess, so confident in her assumptions, has no idea that her actions are leading her straight into a moment she never forget. As the flight wears on, the atmosphere in the cabin begins to shift. The air hostess's dismissive attitude toward the mother and her children doesn't go unnoticed by the other passengers. Whispered conversations ripple through the rows, some casting sympathetic glances at the mother while others exchange disapproving looks aimed at the hostess. The young couple seated a few rows back leans toward each other, murmuring about how hard the mother is trying. She's doing everything she can. "Why is the flight attendant being so rude?" the woman whispers. An older man nearby nods in agreement, watching as the mother carefully feeds her younger child while keeping the older one entertained with a quiet game. The breaking point comes when the mother requests some water for her children. The air hostess, clearly annoyed, takes her time bringing it over. When she finally arrives, she places the cups on the tray table with a loud clink. "Here you go," she says, her tone flat. The older child accidentally tips one of the cups, and water splashes onto the tray. The mother quickly grabs napkins, trying to clean it up before it becomes an issue. But the air hostess rolls her eyes, muttering under her breath, "Of course." This time, her comment is loud enough for those nearby to hear. A middle-aged man sitting across the aisle clears his throat loudly, catching the hostess's attention. "Excuse me," he says, his voice firm. I think the lady deserves a bit more respect. She's handling a tough situation with a lot of grace." The air hostess freezes, her cheeks flushing slightly as she mumbles an insincere, "Of course, sir." She walks away quickly, but the damage is done. Several passengers exchange nods of approval at the man's intervention. The mother, though visibly touched by the support, keeps her head down, focusing on her children. She doesn't want to make a scene, but the growing tension in the cabin is impossible to ignore. Unbeknownst to the air hostess, her every move is being observed not just by the passengers but by someone who holds the power to redefine her future. And as the flight inches closer to its destination, the stage is being set for a revelation that will leave everyone speechless. As the flight continues, the air hostess finally takes a moment to breathe in the galley. She glances toward the cabin, her eyes briefly landing on the mother's row again. Despite her outward confidence, there's a small, nagging voice in the back of her mind. Perhaps she's been a bit too harsh. But then again, she rationalizes, if people don't prepare themselves for travel, they make things harder for everyone else. Returning to the aisle, she notices something she hadn't seen before. The mother is quietly working on a tablet while her kids nap beside her. The tablet bears a sleek logo, the same logo that's stitched onto the air hostess's uniform, the airline's logo. The hostess narrows her eyes, trying to make sense of what she's seeing. She leans in slightly, pretending to adjust a nearby passenger's overhead bin, and catches a glimpse of what's on the screen. It's a document with the airline's header, filled with charts and what looks like an executive report. Curiosity starts to creep in. Who is this woman? The hostess wonders. She begins to notice other details she had overlooked before: the mother's confident yet understated demeanor, the calm authority with which she manages her children despite the chaos. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crosses the hostess's mind. Could this passenger be more than she appears? The possibility unsettles her, but she quickly shakes it off. No, it's probably nothing. She's just a tired mom who happens to have airline stationery. That doesn't mean anything. Still, the thought lingers. The air hostess's interactions with the mother grow less curt, though her underlying frustration remains. She doesn't want to admit it, but the realization that this woman might have some connection to the airline makes her slightly more cautious. Little does she know, the truth about the mother's identity is far more significant than she could ever imagine. And soon, that truth will shatter every assumption she's made about this family and about her own behavior. As the plane begins its descent, the mood in the cabin shifts. The once busy and tense atmosphere now feels quieter, with passengers settling in for the final moments of the flight. The mother gathers her children, securing their seatbelts, preparing for landing. Her movements are smooth and practiced, as if this is just another ordinary flight for her, even though it's anything but. The air hostess walks down the aisle, doing a final check before the landing. She stops at the mother's row again, briefly pausing as if to say something. The words are on the tip of her tongue, a half-formed reprimand about the flight's disruptions. But before she can speak, Mother looks up at her with a calm, composed smile. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience earlier," the mother says, her voice low but firm. "I just wanted to make sure my kids were comfortable." The hostess, caught off guard by the polite tone, stammers a response, "Of course, ma'am. No problem." She forces a smile, her mind racing, still unsure about the mother's true identity. Just as she turns to walk away, the mother pulls a business card from her bag and hands it over. "In case you need to reach me," she says, her voice carrying just enough weight to make the hostess pause. The hostess takes the card without thinking, glancing down at it. The logo on the card is unmistakable, the airline's logo. But what really catches her attention is the title under the name: CEO, airline name. For a long moment, the air hostess stands frozen, staring at the card. Her face pales as the realization sinks in. This woman, this tired, humble, and seemingly ordinary mother, was the CEO of the entire airline. The hostess's heart races, her mind struggling to process what just happened. She feels the color drain from her face as she remembers every harsh word, every dismissive gesture, every judgmental glance she threw at this woman who, unbeknownst to her, had the power to make or break careers within the company. "I didn't know," the air hostess stammers, her voice small and shaky. The mother, now fully aware of the impact her reveal has had, simply nods. "I understand, but I think we all could benefit from a little more patience and kindness toward one another, don't you?" Her words are gentle but carry a quiet authority. The air hostess, her pride shattered, opens her mouth to apologize, but the words stick in her throat. She's not sure what she can say to undo the damage she's caused. The realization hits her hard. Her quick judgment and lack of empathy have just cost her far more than she ever imagined. The moment the family is out of sight, the air hostess breathes deeply, silently vowing to change her attitude. She's learned a valuable lesson today, one that will stay with her for the rest of her career. As the passengers disembark, the air hostess lingers in the galley, her mind racing. She replays every interaction she had with the mother, the sarcastic remarks, the judgmental glances, the impatience that had grown in her every time she passed by that family. Now, every single moment feels like a punch in the gut. She can't shake the image of the business card, the CEO's name glaring up at her. Her colleagues start to filter in from the cabin, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing inside her. One of them, a fellow flight attendant, casually remarks, "Another tough flight. Some passengers can really be a handful." The air hostess forces a tight smile, but inside, the words feel hollow. She doesn't join in the conversation. Instead, she stands by the galley window, looking out at the airport as the final few passengers leave the plane. She's lost in thought, reflecting on her behavior. How could I have been so blind, she wonders. I judged her based on nothing more than assumptions. The weight of her actions begins to sink in. She had let her own frustrations with the chaos of the flight cloud her judgment, never once considering that the woman she had dismissed so easily might have been in a much more challenging situation than she realized. Now, that very woman has the power to change her life in an instant. A voice breaks through her thoughts, and she turns to find the captain approaching her. "You did a good job today," he says with a reassuring smile. But she can't bring herself to smile back. The words feel empty, meaningless, after everything that's happened. "Thank you," she replies quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her colleague, noticing her demeanor, asks if everything is all right. The air hostess nods stiffly, forcing herself to act normal, but inside, she feels far from it. She can't stop thinking about the mother's words, her calm demeanor, and the quiet power she had held all along. And as the day continues, the air hostess begins to realize that the real lesson wasn't just about who the woman was, it was about how she had treated her. The harshness, the impatience, the lack of empathy. That's what I need to change, she thinks, not just for my job, but for the people I encounter every day. In the quiet moments of reflection, the air hostess makes a silent vow to be more patient, more understanding, and less quick to judge, because she knows now that appearances can be deceiving, and every person deserves respect no matter who they are or where they come from. The flight may be over, but the impact of this experience will last a lifetime. As the mother steps off the plane, she takes a moment to breathe in the fresh air of the airport terminal. Her children are already excitedly tugging at her hands, eager to explore the next part of their journey. But in the quiet of the moment, she reflects on everything that happened during the flight, the looks, the judgments, and the air hostess's behavior. She's not angry. She understands that people sometimes act out of frustration or impatience, especially in stressful situations. But she can't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Is this how we treat each other? She wonders. How many people go through their days making assumptions without ever taking the time to truly understand someone else's situation? For her, the flight was a reminder of how important it is to stay grounded, to remain patient, especially when it feels like everything is spinning out of control. She has worked hard to get where she is, and her position as CEO is a reflection of years of dedication, not entitlement. She watches her children, both lost in their own little world of excitement, and she smiles. Her children don't know the weight of the interactions she's just experienced. They are simply enjoying the adventure of flying. And in that moment, she realizes that it's moments like these, moments of calm amidst chaos, that matter the most. As she walks through the terminal, her phone buzzes with a message. It's from her assistant, reminding her of an important meeting scheduled later in the day. She's already mentally prepared for the next phase of her day, but something about the way the air hostess treated her sticks with her. Maybe it's time to remind people of the importance of kindness, she thinks, even in the most unexpected places. She knows that the hostess will probably think about their interaction for a long time, and perhaps that's enough. People don't always change overnight, but sometimes a single moment is enough to make someone reflect and rethink their behavior. As she exits the terminal with her children in tow, the CEO's thoughts shift from the events of the flight to the next chapter of her day. But there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that, through one simple act of revealing who she truly is, she may have just planted a seed of change, one that will not only impact the air hostess, but also everyone else who may be watching and learning from that moment. It's a reminder that every interaction, no matter how small, has the potential to make a lasting impact. And for her, that's what truly matters. As the mother steps off the plane, she takes a moment to breathe in the fresh air of the airport terminal. Her children are already excitedly tugging at her hands, eager to explore the next part of their journey. But in the quiet of the moment, she reflects on everything that happened during the flight: the looks, the judgments, and the air hostess's behavior. She's not angry. She understands that people sometimes act out of frustration or impatience, especially in stressful situations. But she can't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Is this how we treat each other? She wonders. How many people go through their days making assumptions without ever taking the time to truly understand someone else's situation? For her, the flight was a reminder of how important it is to stay grounded, to remain patient, especially when it feels like everything is spinning out of control. She has worked hard to get where she is, and her position as CEO is a reflection of years of dedication, not entitlement. She watches her children, both lost in their own little world of excitement, and she smiles. Her children don't know the weight of the interactions she's just experienced. They are simply enjoying the adventure of flying. And in that moment, she realizes that it's moments like these, moments of calm amidst chaos, that matter the most. As she walks through the terminal, her phone buzzes with a message. It's from her assistant, reminding her of an important meeting scheduled later in the day. She's already mentally prepared for the next phase of her day, but something about the way the air hostess treated her sticks with her. Maybe it's time to remind people of the importance of kindness, she thinks, even in the most unexpected places. She knows that the hostess will probably think about their interaction for a long time, and perhaps that's enough. People don't always change overnight, but sometimes a single moment is enough to make someone reflect and rethink their behavior. As she exits the terminal with her children in tow, the CEO's thoughts shift from the events of the flight to the next chapter of her day. But there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that, through one simple act of revealing who she truly is, she may have just planted a seed of change, one that will not only impact the air hostess, but also everyone else who may be watching and learning from that moment. It's a reminder that every interaction, no matter how small, has the potential to make a lasting impact. And for her, that's what truly matters. Back at the airline's base, the air hostess can't seem to shake the encounter. It's been hours since the flight landed, yet the memory of the mother's quiet dignity and the weight of her reveal continue to replay in her mind. The CEO's calm words echo in her ears. We all could benefit from a little more patience and kindness toward one another, don't you? The air hostess sits in the break room, the usual chatter of her colleagues fading into the background. Her thoughts are consumed by the realization of what she had done. She had judged someone based on nothing but a few fleeting moments and her own frustrations. She had let a bad day at work cloud her judgment, and now, that moment will forever define her. As she replays the conversation in her head, she feels a deep sense of shame. I treated her like she was just another difficult passenger, she thinks, but she wasn't just anyone. She was the CEO of the airline I work for. Her fingers nervously tap the edge of the table, a physical manifestation of her anxiety. She can't help but wonder how many other people she's treated the same way. The realization hits her hard. She's not just embarrassed because she was rude to the CEO. She's embarrassed because she's let her own impatience and lack of empathy shape the way she treats others. How many times have I let small inconveniences affect my interactions with people? Her colleague, noticing her quiet demeanor, asks, "You okay?" The air hostess forces a smile, but it's clear she's not fine. "No, I'm not," she admits, her voice soft. "I messed up today. Big time." Her colleague raises an eyebrow, intrigued. "What happened?" The air hostess hesitates for a moment, but then decides to share. She tells her colleague about the flight, about the mother and her children, and about the CEO's identity being revealed. She talks about her own feelings of regret and how, in hindsight, she wishes she had treated the family with more understanding and respect. The colleague listens attentively, offering only a few words of support. It happens to all of us, they say, but what matters is that you learn from it. The air hostess nods, grateful for the understanding. But deep down, she knows that this lesson is bigger than any one flight. It's about how she treats people every day. In the days that follow, the air hostess starts making a conscious effort to be more patient, more understanding, and less judgmental. She greets every passenger with a smile, no matter how tired or frustrated she feels. She listens more, reacts less, and strives to make each interaction as positive as possible. And though she doesn't know if she ever crossed paths with the CEO again, she carries the lessons from that flight with her every day. She knows that one simple act of kindness can change everything, and she's determined to live by that truth. For the first time in a long while, she feels like she's truly learning and growing. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important thing she could have gained from the experience. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Thanks for watching.